Hey meat trapper, I'd like to get started snaring, but I just got my trapping catalog in and I have no idea what to buy. I'm more confused now than I ever was. I looked through this catalog and there's hundreds and hundreds of things in here and I don't even know what half of them are. What do I need to buy to get started snaring? Just the basics to get going. Now I get that question a lot and it's a good question. Now, you have to pay attention to your state laws because some states are going to have different laws on what a snare consists of or what it has to have, whether it has to have a deer stop or what have you. We're going to talk about just the basics, and this is if snaring is legal in your state. You can get started snaring for less than $100. It's the cheapest, quickest way to get into trapping. But over the long term, remember, just because it's cheap to get into doesn't mean that it's cheap to stay into. Over the long haul, snaring is the most expensive form of trapping that you can do, and that's simply because with every catch, you have to make a new trap. If you make a catch with a body grip or a foothold trap, you don't have to throw the trap away and make a new one. With the snare, you do. You got to rebuild the snare. It's one catch, one usage. That being said, what do we need to buy to get started? Now, there are two ways to get started. One is to buy your snares pre-made, and two is to buy the supplies and make them yourself. Buying your snares pre-made is a great way to get started because number one, you're going to get professionally made snares that are going to work. They're going to work right. And if you've never built your own snares before, by having some professionally made snares to work with and look at and use, when you go to build your own, you're going to know what you're supposed to end up with. You're going to know what they should look like and how they should work. So that's really my first piece of advice, is to buy your snares and learn to snare, and then later learn to build your own snares. So that's one way to approach it. The second way to approach it is to buy your materials and build your snares yourself. That's cheaper, but you got to know a little bit about how to do them, and it takes time and effort, and if you're not used to it, you're going to screw a lot of snares up, and you're going to end up wasting some money anyway. So regardless of whether you choose method one of buying your snares or method two, building your snares, you're going to need some basic tools. The first tool that you're going to need is a pair of quality cable cutters. Don't go cheap on your tools. Don't go cheap. Your cable cutters are what you use to cut the cable, and even if you're not building your snares, when you make a catch on a snare catch, a lot of times the snare will have become so tightly wrapped around the animal that you're going to have to cut the cable off of the animal that you caught. So you need a pair of good quality cable cutters. The pair I use, they're made in Japan. I've had them for about 15 years, and I think they sell for, I don't know, $30 or so, $20 or $30. There's a pair that's made in Switzerland that I believe sells for about 60 or 70. I've never needed those. I think that's a little bit in the way of overkill, but I wouldn't go budget. Don't go cheap. You want a good, clean cut on your cable. You don't want the ends fraying out and just making life miserable for you. So get a pair of cable cutters. Only use them for cutting cable. Don't use them for cutting wire. Second tool you're going to need is a good pair of pliers. A good pair of quality side cutter or linesman type pliers. I had the same pair of pliers for, I don't know, over 10 years until I lost them. I didn't have them tied down, and they went over the side of my boat. Off they went. So now I'm using a pair of pliers made by Channel Lock, and I'm really happy with those. They're made in America. They're quality pliers. They cut wire good, and whatever you get, make sure you can cut wire up to a 9-gauge wire and cut it comfortably. I don't like needle nose pliers. I like the linesman style pliers. You're going to be cutting a lot of wire if you're snaring, and you're going to be twisting a lot of wire. Don't skimp on your pliers or your cable cutters. So that being said, those are the major tools that you're going to need. So let's talk about the actual supply list. Now, the way I estimate buying my supplies, you can make your snares different lengths. Sometimes for beaver, I make mine real short, say 42 inches. Sometimes for predators, I make them a lot longer, 6 feet long. But as a general rule of thumb for calculating how much I need to buy, I'm gonna assume a 5-foot snare. The reason I'm going to assume a 5-foot snare is because when you buy 100 feet of cable or 500 feet of cable or 1,000 feet of cable, it makes your calculations real simple. If you buy 100 feet of cable, each snare is 5 foot long, you're going to get 20 snares out of that 100 feet of cable. So right now, 500 feet of cable is going to run you about 35 bucks. Depending upon what size and what style, what type of cable, a little more, a little less. But 500 feet of cable, which is enough to make 100 snares, $35. The next thing you're going to need is some snare locks. I like to use the slim locks, but I've used cam locks in the past. They work great. There's a lot of good locks out there, washer locks. But I'm going to buy a couple of dozen locks to go with those 100 snares. Now, I don't pre-build all 100 snares at a time. I can't carry 100 snares. I can't set 100 snares, so I don't need 100 snare locks. For 100 snares, I would probably buy 2 dozen locks, because once you make a catch, you can cut the cable and you can reuse those locks. I usually get about 5 catches out of a lock before it becomes so wallered out that it gets loose and I discard it. So if I go and I buy 2 dozen locks, that's 24 locks. For 100 snares, that's 4 uses for each lock, which is fairly conservative. 2 dozen locks would cost me about $8. Once again, depending upon the lock. The next thing you're going to need is some swivels. Personally, I've gotten to where I use the barrel swivels. They're made for saltwater fishing or the heavy-duty fishing tackle. I've gotten away from using traditional snare swivels. Once again, since I don't build all 100 snares at a time, I may build 2 dozen of these snares at a time. That's what I'll normally run. So I'm going to buy 2 dozen swivels because I can reuse those swivels over and over and over again, just like I can the locks. So 2 dozen of the good number 6 barrel swivels would run me about $15 for 2 dozen of those. Those are high quality swivels. The next thing you're going to need is a bunch of wire. You see me using all kind of support wire and tie wire. In years past, I've used 9-gauge wire as my snare support. I went to 11-gauge this year, had good results with it. But for general purpose use, you can use 14-gauge wire. Do not go lighter than 14-gauge wire. If you need a stiffer support, you can put it in a drill, chuck it up in a drill and twist it and get a very stiff wire. 14-gauge wire is easy to work with, and you can use it as a tie wire and as a snare support wire. So starting off, you could get 2 rolls of your 14-gauge wire. That's going to run you about $10. The next thing you're going to need when you go to build your snares is you're going to need some double ferrules. Now, I used to use stop buttons on one end and double ferrules for the other end. I got tired of having to maintain 2 different things in inventory. So what I've gone to now is when I make my swivels, I only use double ferrules. So I know I'm going to need 2 double ferrules for each snare, 1 to terminate each end of the snare. So if I'm going to build 100 snares, I'm going to need 200 double ferrules. So 200 double ferrules will run you about $15 at today's prices. So when you total this all up, we've got $35 for our cable, $8 for our locks, $15 for our swivels, $10 for 2 rolls of 14-gauge wire, 200 double ferrules, $15, cable cutters, estimated $20. It's a total of $103 for our tool and our supplies. So anyway, that's a good list. I'll put the entire list, let's see, yeah, that's not going to work, but I'll put the entire list in the description below with the prices as far as where to buy your supplies. If I'm going to buy my snares pre-made, I like to buy from snare1.com. Newt Sterling, he makes great snares. I've never had a bad snare from Newt, ever. He does charge a premium, but hey, you get what you pay for, right? When it comes to simply buying supplies, you can order from F&T, fntpost.com. You can order from Minnesota brand, that's mentrapprod.com, I believe. I'll put all of this in the video description down below. And then, of course, you can order from snare1.com as well. So anyway, I hope this has been useful. Snaring is a great thing. I love snaring. It's dear to my heart. Snares are lightweight. They're very effective. If somebody comes along and robs you, all they get is a 50-cent or a $1 snare. They're not making off with a $30 Belial or a $35 TS85 and a bunch of chain and all of that stuff, you know, that really pisses you off. But now that we're in the off season, this is the time to make these decisions and to think about what you want to buy. And just get out Excel. If you have a computer, get out Excel. Make you a spreadsheet, put some of this stuff down on paper, run the calculations, and hopefully you can use the formula that I've given you of 5-foot snares, 2 ferrules per snare, 1 swivel, and 1 lock for every 4 or 5 snares, and put those quantities together and get an idea of what you need to order to get into snaring. So thanks a lot, and we'll see you next time.